Covid-19 ESL education paradigm, a remote learning protocol for digital citizenship and learning efficacy in Hong Kong higher education services by Mr. Noble Lo. Noble Lo is a lecturer at the College of Professional and Continuing Education at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Prior to joining HKCC, he was assistant professor of English at Wusong University in South Korea, where he developed 2 new undergraduate courses. He is presently a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, a chartered linguist at the Chartered Institute of Linguistics, and a member of the Society for Humanities Studies in East Asia. Without further ado, Mr. Lo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for giving me the time and the chance for me to share my research output with all of you guys. And I really look forward to any, for example, Q&A sections afterwards. So again, my research topic is post-COVID-19 ESL education, focusing on how, for example, the students and the teachers learn and teach during this pandemic. So let's see, right, okay. So for my research objective, so we analyze how the online technologies will affect student and teachers' learning, and how new media employed in the learning education system, and how the productive learning strategy can be adopted. And also I will comment on, for example, the opportunity for focusing and supporting teacher strategies that we can use to improve student learning in the virtual background. So in other words, the primary aim for the study is to critically assess the effects of COVID-19 on a shift towards online learning and the influences on higher education teaching strategies in Hong Kong. So we focus, for example, on the primary data and the secondary research from the scholars in the field, and also from my students, and also from my friends teaching universities, their student input as well. So we include, for example, the interview data. We also distribute questions as well. The data derived from teachers of Hong Kong English language teaching classroom, and also higher education institution as well. So hopefully, so this interdisciplinary approach could be actually utilized to present the overall literature from education, and also positive psychology approach. So as you can see here, we conduct students from a variety of background in higher education institutions, including, for example, the University of Hong Kong, the Chinese University, HKUST, Poly CTU, BAPSU, and Open University as well. So participants include students who are currently reading for these programs, associate degree, undergraduate programs, and also postgraduate programs in these universities. Right. But once the survey results have been collected, additional evidence regarding post-COVID-19 learning experiences was supplemented by secondary sources, including academic journals and industry reports. So these secondary results were predominantly qualitative and designed not only to interpret the effects of the global pandemic on higher learning education patterns, but also forecast the future of digital learning technologies in the education system in Hong Kong and its world impacts. Right. So for my research, I use a mixed method approach. As I said, we use both quantitative and qualitative methods in order to draw comparison. Right. So this group of research surrounding teacher pedagogy and tactics is broad, encompassing a breadth of both social and scientific studies that endeavor to interpret behaviors according to their situational conditions. The current investigation has adopted perspective applying a positive psychological philosophy on the collection and interpretation of both primary and secondary evidence relate to the effects of COVID-19 on the technological shift towards online learning in higher education studies. Right, our focus group include, for example, our students and also online educational experience. We focus on how they learn through the online platform. And in terms of course specifics, so basically they're all taking online English language courses, and the geography will be in Hong Kong, of course, because my research will be focusing in the Hong Kong context. In terms of the research methodology, the ESL targets for this study was established ranging from 200 to 300 participants. So a large degree of participation was recorded from the 380 questionnaires distributed across different online channels, with a total sample of 176 participants completing the survey over a 2-month administration period. However, I also actually continue this project. So basically, this is an ongoing project that captures, for example, the post-COVID-19 response. So hopefully, in the next semester, I can also collect more feedback from students for further analysis. So far, by the way, the research finding, program undertaking first of all. So this figure visualizes the distribution with 63.1% of the participants pursuing their associate degree or high diploma, and an additional 34.1% pursuing their bachelor degree. So you can see the distribution here. Right. And for this one, important to the transition of digital learning, the students were asked to report their overall status as either a native or an immigrant in terms of the use of technology, which means, for example, the IT, Zoom, MS Teams, etc., etc. The majority of the participants were technological natives who had close contact with computers and internet over the course of their development. So the transition to digital learning has directly affected students' learning practices, with environmental forces affecting the coping and stress reduction measures used by these learners. So in total, 62.5% of the sample population maintained private environments, whilst 33.5% utilized semi-private or shared environment to facilitate their learning. So for this figure, it highlights a majority bias towards bedroom learning that likely affords privacy and noise reduction, whilst 13.1% of the students cited a sitting room and 10.8% indicated a dining room. So correlation tests for the relationship between the type of space and perceived adequacy of space failed to highlight a data relationship, a statistical relationship, indicating that spatial adaptation was likely a normal condition of digital learning. So for this diagram, it summarizes the perception of the quality of training or supports received by these students for online learning, whereby just less than 1/3 of them find such training good or excellent, while the majority identify the training as average. To assess the effectiveness of digital learning on student experiences, comparisons were drawn between before and after effects of this learning process. So this figure highlights perceived efficacy of the online learning environment before and after COVID-19 respectively. And there was improvement in the general belief that the online learning environment was believed to be effective. And finally, from a general perspective of online English learning, this figure compares the pre and post-COVID perceptions regarding online as the new learning mode, with a pre-COVID-19 mean of 3.31 and a post-COVID-19 mean of 3.27. So this finding reveals that the attitude towards online learning declined during this period. And for this one, just 30.1% of students felt that online learning for the upcoming semester will be effective. In contrast, 32.4% believe that such learning processes would be ineffective, whilst the remainder were uncommitted either way. And for the cost-turbulent analysis, it would be that students in the lower level studies, which means associate degree and high diploma program, will be more open to online study than those who are in the bachelor or master degree courses. So now I'm going to move on to the parts of the psychology in terms of analyzing the figures there. So as I quote, so this is the progression of digital teaching and learning experiences as a game changer. Discussion and analysis. But despite the digitalization of higher education solutions following the COVID-19 outbreak, the transition away from classroom experiences has not wholly distanced students from their instructors, educators, and peers. Instead, new strategies for engaging students in online learning, including breakout rooms, class discussion, Zoom meetings, and message board, have been developed to support student participation. So such communities of practice, or I call the COPS, integrated teacher, moderators, and student leaders in the negotiation of the learning process. So requiring both productive and collaboration and active engagement to improve the nature of these exchanges. And the communities of practice insights actually drawn from Edison in 2020 revealed the social advantages of collaboration learning in massive open learning courses and large-scale educational environment where individual consideration is marginalized by the scope and integration of the classroom itself. The feedback from the student in this survey confirms that due to the accelerated nature of this transition, many students did not receive the training and support they needed to thrive online. So moving forward, it's imperative that educational institutions consider such needs and develop additional support tools to improve the effectiveness of the digital instruction. So despite the flexibility of digital learning and the critical role played by virtual learning during the global pandemic, Marshall and Teotihuacan also acknowledge that many students lack self-regulation and motivation to participate effectively in such solutions over the long time. As a result of these skills deficiencies and behavioral limitations, some scholars observe attitudinal barriers that have created conflicts between the idealized educational scenario and student experiences. Such findings are confirmed in the current study that has revealed a perceptual division amongst English students, in which some have found English learning to be effective, while others have failed to achieve similar outcomes and feel under-supported in their learning. So other scholars in Teotihuacan also confirmed to a similar phenomenon in relation to student burnout, whereby some students viewed digital learning as a positive challenge, and others adopted a negative attitude which shaped their course perception and the perception of their instructor as well. So it basically echoes with my personal teaching experience. Like, for example, if students enter the breakout rooms in Teams or in Zoom, they do not know how to operate the breakout room function. And it turns out that so they have to update their IT infrastructure. So it's sort of like creating sort of challenge when we first approach the all online lessons, like teaching and learning. I believe these findings offer a baseline for student supports in the future through study habits and coping strategies that target student-centered needs. In summary, this section has presented the results of the empirical findings and review generally positive sentiments towards digital learning amongst learners in English language acquisition in Hong Kong. However, the evidence also indicates that without additional support and programs development, students in tertiary education will continue to experience pressures of studies and isolation. And the following slide will conclude this finding and offer some recommendations for further research in this field. But first and foremost, I would like to thank you, my academic fellows, who kindly distributed the questionnaires and encouraged the students to join this research project. In fact, since 2018, Hong Kong has established its position as a digital leader by introducing online and hybrid courses designed to meet the changing needs of students and educators in higher education in Hong Kong. As a result of the 2002 pandemic, the unprecedented shift towards visualization of most university courses has resulted in positive and negative experiences among students and educators. Accordingly, the primary aim of this study is to critically assess the effects of COVID-19 on a shift towards online learning and the influences on tertiary education and its teaching culture in Hong Kong. So this study has demonstrated that students must develop some mechanisms and stress reduction strategies in order to strive and engage in digital classroom activities. Educators can help achieve such outcomes by integrating multiple layers of pedagogy into the educational process, including, for example, group work, direct discussions, video lectures, and summary insights. So personally speaking, when I conducted class visits with my peers, I mean, with other lecturers in classroom, I actually saw most of them use some very interactive technology to run their classes, for example, Powerful and Kahoot, which I believe students are far more interactive. So for learners in English language, practice and participation are always needed. Utilizing various technological resources and tools should be considered before designing future curriculum. Ultimately, the significance of these unplanned COVID-19 experiments in Hong Kong has manifested a growing range of online courses and will be supported by a teaching population that is increasingly aware of students' needs, capable of self-regulation and stress management, and are flexible in the delivery of effective integrated classroom experiences. However, we also got some limitations regarding my project. So the empirical findings presented over the courses of these studies were extrapolated from a structured questionnaire that was administered to students across major universities in Hong Kong. However, the visualization of this study may be limited to allow direct comparison of the results. By focusing on the student experiences and perceptions, these insights have highlighted opportunities for educators to support future learning outcomes and address some of the hurdles and challenges that were identified during the pandemic. This limitation has restricted perceptions or perspective from educators and university, perhaps. However, secondary evidence from industry reports and university feedback was used to supplement these findings. So for my recommendations, finally, I just got like 2 minutes left. The current study has extrapolated insights from student perceptions regarding the effects of digitalization on intra-pandemic learning experiences. Additional research is needed to explore the effectiveness of learning strategies and habits, while further feedback from inside stakeholders should be also considered. So the following 2 studies are recommended for expanding the scope of research in this field. So number 1, I suggest would be a university-based case study of digitalization. It means that by capturing insider perceptions regarding the process of digitalization and underlying effects on pedagogy, it's predicted that strategy for improving digital learning can be introduced at the levels of educators, universities, and managerial administrators as well. So training will be really, really needed. Recommendation 2, so student assessment of digital learning habits. So through an experimental assessment of the effects of positive digital learning habits on student learning capability, it's predicted that blueprints for improving student learning in digital environment can be developed to support future study development. So basically, I have been conducting different strategies and ways to improve student learning and teachers teaching and learning as well. So you could see the book chapters I show in the PowerPoint as well. So basically starting from 2019 to 2020 and 2021. So I basically work with different university lecturers in order to figure out how the different research output can be achieved. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and I welcome any questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Low. I have one question here to start with from Alan Umston. Thank you very much for
Yes.
your presentation. I found it very interesting, especially as I teach English at the same institution as you. I believe that we were developing new new techniques and adopting new technologies very successfully up until the present academic year, when the university required us to teach in hybrid mode. Do you have any views on how your findings might be different were you to conduct the research now?
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, I do believe that, for example, while you actually adopting the hybrid teaching mode, and that's very important, especially when you move from a very traditional classroom to all online classroom, and now hybrid teaching. And next semester, as far as I know, different universities in Hong Kong actually they are trying to use all face-to-face classes. So I do believe that would be sort of like the comparison of from a traditional way to all online to hybrid teaching to back to face, and the difference would be, of course, we have to analyze. For example, we got the student database, the background from hybrid teaching last year and this year, and next year probably, I mean, in January 2021, that will be all face-to-face. So by comparing, for example, their learning perception, especially, for example, the emotion and stress management, we can actually have another piece of writing, which could be quite interesting. And actually, I'm collecting data as well. So another project of mine would be the positive emotion and negative emotion, and how these emotions could affect student perception, and as a result, their school performance, after all.
Thank you. Another question here. You mentioned earlier on that students at lower level courses, below bachelor degree level, were reportedly more open to online learning. Can you explain that in any way?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a very interesting result, because at first I before the experiments, I thought, wow, maybe students with higher education or high level of for example, the undergraduate or postgraduate would be more open-minded. But the results actually tell us that for the university bachelor and master student, they prefer online, but not online. They prefer face-to-face, traditional classroom instead of online. Whilst for associate degree and high diploma student with lower level, they prefer online lesson. So that's very interesting finding, actually review, I guess, at this moment would be based on their confidence. Because when I actually interview them, I conduct like face-to-face interview as them as well using MS Teams. They told me that because if you are able to conduct online lessons and with their camera like turning off, it could be facilitating a more comfortable, carefree environment that they feel less nervous. That's very direct. That's very direct emotion. They feel less nervous, so they would actually, are more willing to share their answer using, for example, MS Teams chatbots, or like now we're using the Zoom chatbots. So it's very effective for students of lower level, associate degree and high diploma. Versus, as I mentioned, university students, they would basically prefer face-to-face because they have a more interactive lesson. They can ask teachers right away. They're more outspoken in a sense. And because they have certain confidence, in order to, for example, share their view and speak English, because English would be the second language for them. So that's an other consideration. So that's why I do believe that for hybrid teaching and online teaching, they got certain advantages. I mean, well, preferred by the associate degree and high degree level students. And from my personal experience, the results, if you compare face-to-face, online and hybrid teaching, student learns a little bit better than face-to-face, surprisingly. But given the fact that you have to involve a lot of organize of like interaction games, Kahoots, poll everywhere in order to draw their attention.
Okay, if I may now move to a question by Mark Ritchie. Is asking if the technology, is it the technology or the adapted content set of activities that made learning more successful? I'm asking because digital literacy and educational technology are not exactly the same.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for the question. Indeed, for digital literacy and educational technology, I do believe that, for example, when you have a set of technological tools in order to facilitate their learning and your teaching as well, it also should be in line with the level of students being able to adopt their learning style or not. And it also refers to the technological equipment that students have. In terms of, for example, I actually read another journal's paper by Professor Chick, like in 2019 when I was writing out a research paper. She's now also teaching at City University English department. So we can actually adopt, for example, not only online interaction and online games. If we can speak the student language in a way that if you are able to understand the recent trend, for example, of online games of the students, that would be much better was to build a closer or better rapport with our students as well. So in terms of, for example, the activities and the contents, both are equally important. But in order to facilitate, for example, more interactive classroom, so the online learning and teaching techniques, I would say will be very important. The content we cannot really change a lot, isn't it? But we can change our teaching style in order to facilitate student learning, which of course, as a result, reflected in our teaching evaluation.
All right, I've got another question from Alan Ormston. If we return to face-to-face teaching, will we continue to adopt the new methods that we have learned through online teaching? In other words, has teaching been changed forever?
Oh, that's interesting. I look forward to this one as well, because from next semester we probably go from like hybrid teaching to face-to-face, and I sometimes wonder whether we can use this kind of, for example, interactive approach and cater the needs of students with, for example, special needs as well. Because sometimes students would be, they are not shy, but they have a certain like needs in terms of expressing themselves. And for those students, maybe they are too shy, maybe they're with education needs. How could we help them? I think that's very important, because we should include all students in the classroom. We should be inclusive. So by using, for example, online learning technology, that will be better to cater different needs of students. And as I mentioned before, for students who are too shy, for students who are studying associate degree and high diploma, you need to adopt a positive psychology. You have to be more encouraging. You have to provide more positive enforcement in order to ask them to speak up, to share the idea. So if I'm just wondering if this is okay, we could also ask students to bring the computer with certain like interactive all-night activities like games. But in terms of traditional classroom, that's easier for teachers, really. It's easier for teachers because for face-to-face teaching, we can design cards, we can stick the cards to the walls, and students can actually move around and have some fun while they are learning. But for online classroom, we got an other platform, isn't it? So it depends. Well, the COVID-19 situation, of course, and hopefully when we return to face-to-face teaching and learning, we can still use the for example, Power Everywhere or Kahoot or other games or Flip Classroom and the others as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Long. We have reached the end of our session, so thanks everyone for attending, and feel free to continue discussing in the communal hub. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.